let me see here. So that we can share the information at a later date. We are going to record this, and I just started that so that you can grab that on our website later next week if you need to review any of the information. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the experts, and thank you again for joining us tonight.
Perfect. Well, thanks, David. Hopefully you can see me okay and hear me okay still. Everything looks good?
Everything's great.
Perfect. Okay, well then we'll just kind of jump right in and get started. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from, because it typically helps understand my sarcasm and my humor and all the other things that come along. When you do the same thing for 20 plus years, you get a little loopy, so that sometimes happens. But I was raised in Oklahoma with a school teacher. So if you hear me repeating myself many, many times, it's not because I think you missed it the first 2 or 10 times. It's because when people are taking notes, which I hope you'll be taking notes, if you're taking notes, sometimes you miss something that I said one time, and I'll say it again just to hopefully catch it up or just let it sink in a little bit. Now, the other issue was my grandmother was the school teacher, and she was very sarcastic. So if you ever hear some sarcasm in my voice, that's 100% her fault, because that's where I get it all from. And I was telling David and Bill earlier, and I think Lori and somebody else was on early this morning or early this time. And she took actually all 4 of us kids. Luckily, she was pretty young because I was 6 months old at the time. My brother was 3, my sister was 10, and my oldest sister was 13. So most of the people on here are probably in that 63 to maybe 67 age group, I would imagine. So if you can think about a young woman who was only 68 years old at the time, taking a 6-month-old, and then a 3-year-old, a 10-year-old girl, and a 13-year-old girl, it's a lot to handle for a little while. So she kept pretty spry, and she did pass away at 101 many, many years ago. But that's a lot of where my energy comes from and my commitment to teaching and having people learn. She was brilliant. Wish that rubbed off a little bit more on me. But what I'll do tonight is also talk a lot about Medicare, but some of the things that intertwine with Medicare that people have questions about. But I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because this is going to be an overview. And there's things that we're not going to talk about tonight. So let me tell you the things we're not going to talk about. Things like the federal employee health plans. Certain people have retired at certain stages, and the federal employees have a totally different system than what a lot of us have available to us. So while we know everything about that program and can help answer questions about it, that's not what we're going to talk about tonight. We also are not going to talk about TRICARE or TRICARE for life. And for those of you unfamiliar, TRICARE is for military people who've been around for 20 plus years in the military, and they get a different type of health care that's wonderful, but it doesn't involve everybody else. There's some other little things like Ford Motor Company, or right here in our backyard at Philip Morris or Dominion Energy. Certain people have different plans that don't really pertain to an overview. If people have questions, we're happy to answer those questions later. But tonight, we're only going to talk about the options that are available in the public. So they're available to everybody, including TRICARE for life, including federal employees, but it's just an inclusive topic tonight. All right. So as we're getting into Medicare and talking about it, it starts bringing up some really confusing things already. Like, what is Medicare? How does it work? Or how do you even get involved? How do you start Medicare? Well, I know you guys can't repeat things or say yes or say no to me on the webinar, but think to yourself, or you can say it out loud anyway. But have you ever heard that expression, darned if you do and darned if you don't? You know, I'm trying to keep it clean. Well, that's Medicare, because there are penalties with Medicare. And you're darned if you do and darned if you don't. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of people, when they're approaching the age of 65, they get told the most wild, crazy things, and about a half of it's true. Maybe a third of it's true. Things like penalties. So the issue is, if you sign up for Medicare at age 65, when you should have not signed up for Medicare at age 65, you actually get penalized by the IRS. So you should not sign up at age 65 for certain people. So that's darned if you do. You're darned if you do sign up, and you shouldn't have. But then some people are darned if they don't sign up, because there's some people who absolutely should be signing up for Medicare at age 65. And for the people who should sign up but don't, they're kind of darned because they don't. They're darned because they didn't. So those people get another set of different kind of penalties, which are lifetime penalties, because they did not sign up for certain things or Medicare when they were first eligible. And you have to be very careful, because different people have different circumstances. Even people who work at your own jobs, your own coworkers, have totally different sets of experiences and circumstances. So it's very important for you personally, do you or do you not need to sign up for Medicare at age 65? And that's a personal circumstance. So if people ever have questions about that, more than happy to answer those questions. They can call our office and go through all those kind of things. It's very simple. It takes usually about 5 to 6 minutes. Well, then.
And Bryan, if I may,
Sure.
I will remind folks, and I know a question has already come in. Please put your questions in there, put them in the queue. Bill and Bryan will review all those. We're allocating time towards the end to go over those, and so that we can get through the material. We'll wait to do those questions at the end. But if something comes up and you're like, man, I'm going to forget that, write that question in the little Q&A box, and we will definitely get to it. So thank you.
Perfectly said. Yep, absolutely. Just that way you don't forget it. It's already in there, and we'll tackle it when we get there. And Wendy, I see your question, and we will get it towards the end. And that's pretty much exactly what I was talking about, by the way. So there's a teaser for you to stick around to the end of the webinar. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to share my screen, which, by the way, I did mention I'm from Oklahoma, which means I'm terrible with computers. So I'm going to click this button, and it might go dark for a second. And then I'm going to try to do the little presentation thing. It's everybody's favorite. It's called PowerPoint. Usually they're pretty boring. And we try to keep it light and fun, because this is governmental health insurance. So as much as you can make governmental health insurance fun and exciting, we're going to try it out. But so the first slide obviously is our contact information. That's, the name of our company. And we are here in the Central Virginia, Richmond area. Most of us are in Chesterfield or Mechanicsville. We're licensed in a number of states, but primarily we deal a lot with people in Virginia. But again, we are licensed in quite a few other states. But as we're getting in to the topic, what I would really love for you all to do is, if you happen to have 2 blank sheets of paper. So now everybody's scrambling to grab sheets of paper probably. But if you had 2 sheets of paper, what I'd like for you to do is have one page that has option number 1. And then we're going to have another page that has option number 2. Because at the end of the day, you only get 2 choices with Medicare if you're dealing with the publicly available options. So you'll either go with option number 1 when it's time for you to come on to Medicare, or you'll go on to option 2. Now, for the people who love to draw squiggles and arrows and funny little diagrams, please don't do that, because you won't be able to read your papers later. What I'd ask you to do is write everything down that's on the page that's going to come up on the screen. And if it looks exactly like the screen at the end, you have succeeded. Because that way, when you look back on your notes, as long as you can still read your own handwriting, which I can't do sometimes, but as long as you can read your notes, then you can read it quickly as a quick overview and know exactly what you were talking about and learning about. So The first option is option number one. Okay. Now, because I'm from Oklahoma originally, we have a lot of analogies for everything. So if you try to use my analogies around other people, they're going to not have a clue what you're talking about. But also, if you start rattling off insurance jargon like Medicare supplements, Medigap, Part D, all these weird things, people also don't know what you're talking about. So we use analogies to help people remember that there's a big difference between option one and option two. And there's not a right way or a wrong way. It's how you would like to deal with Medicare and medical coverage. So the first option in my little analogy here is option number one is like a car. So I'm going to have you write the word car in quotation marks. But with a car, everybody knows how a car works. You get to go where you want to go, when you want to go, for whatever you wanted to go there for. People buy a car for the freedom and flexibility. It's convenient to have your own car. But nobody buys a car to save money. So in most cases, option number one is not going to save people money. In most cases. It's not designed to save money. It's designed for freedom and flexibility. That's why I say it's like the car. Well, to get option number one, you wind up with 3 separate ID cards. So we're going to systematically go through these 3 separate ID cards. Well, the first ID card is a card that some people have seen. It's called the Medicare card. Now, if you see this Medicare ID card, that's pretty much what it looks like. Medicare, just Medicare by itself, is Part A and Part B. And you see the Part A and Part B inside that Medicare ID card. Well, that's through the government. And actually, that's the only thing that's through the government that we're going to talk about today. Through the government, provided by the government, you paid into it through your payroll taxes and all the other money that you've given to the government. So what happens is Medicare offers health insurance, and Medicare has these 2 main parts, Part A and Part B. Now, Part A, they call it hospital or hospitalization insurance. And Part A is totally separate from Part B. Well, if I was describing Part A, I wouldn't just call it hospital. I'd actually call it inpatient medical care, because inpatient medical care is more encompassing, if you think about it, because yes, inpatient care is typically done at a hospital, but it's also inpatient if somebody goes on hospice. So if anybody knows somebody, unfortunately, that needed to go on to hospice services are filed under Part A, are covered under Part A. But so are inpatient rehab. So around the Richmond area, if this is being broadcast all over the internet later, around the Richmond, Virginia area, there's these beautiful, wonderful inpatient rehabs called Sheltering Arms. Well, if you had Part A and you went to an inpatient rehab like Sheltering Arms, then Part A would pay some of those claims, the medical bills that the inpatient rehab would have. Okay, so that's Part A, and that's insurance. But we have to pay for insurance. We've always paid for all of our insurances. So Part A is actually the part that you have prepaid for your entire working lives. If you ever looked at one of your pay stubs, which most people don't look at pay stubs anymore, we just look at the money we get. But on a payroll pay stub, you can see where it says federal tax, state tax, FICA tax, and then it says Medicare tax. It's the Medicare tax that you've paid all the years that you've worked that is continually going to prepay for Part A. Now, I said prepay for Part A because when you do quit working and you come on to Medicare, then Part A is considered paid up. Don't let anybody tell you it's free. Friends and family will tell you Part A is free. It is absolutely not free. You have paid thousands of dollars into Part A. But you just don't have to keep paying for it when you retire. Okay, so When we do retire, we don't have to continue to pay for Part A. It would cover inpatient medical claims. But then there's Part B, like in Boy or Banana or Bravo for the military people. So Part B, the government considers medical coverage. There's a vast description, medical. I would tell people, think of Part B services as outpatient medical services. And outpatient medical services for Part B are things like doctor office visits, lab work. The emergency room is actually considered outpatient. Ambulance bills, those are billed under Part B. You've got outpatient surgery, like people have cataract surgeries or shoulder surgeries or things like that. That's all filed. All those bills are billed to Part B. Well, we have not prepaid for Part B. So we would have to start paying for Part B when we need Part B. But when you do need it, currently, now when I say currently, if this is into the next year and following many years down the line, you know how things live on the internet, the current year Medicare premium is $164.90 a month. It is the year 2023. So in 2023, the Medicare Part B monthly payment is $164.90. So when people are receiving their Social Security income, well, out of their Social Security income, the Medicare payment is deducted. You ever heard that expression, out of sight, out of mind? A lot of people who have Social Security don't even remember they're still paying for Medicare. It's out of sight, out of mind. The $164 is coming directly out of their Social Security checks. So sometimes they tell their friends, I'm not paying anything for Medicare. Yeah, they are. They're paying $164.90, but they just forgot about it. And that happens. Now, if you're not getting Social Security income, well, then the government is going to send you a bill. And they typically send a quarterly bill, by the way. All right. So that's paying for Part B. But then we got to start talking about the fact that that's a base rate for Part B. Now, it's the base rate because the government charges people more for Medicare if they do well financially. And it's a good and bad thing to work with equity concepts because it's a good thing that you have money saved and the money keeps growing and they do a fantastic job at helping you grow the money. But it's a little bad because you end up possibly paying a little bit more for Medicare. Now, that's a good problem to have at the end of the day. If you have enough money and your income is such at a level that you have to pay a little bit more for Medicare, that's a bittersweet, but more sweet than bitter. And today, again, in 2023, when you start making over $194,000 as a married couple, well, then you have to start paying a little bit more for Medicare. If you make $82,000 or more, well, then you pay a little bit more for Medicare. So that's $194,000 and $97,000, it's $97,000 or above as an individual. That's when you end up starting to pay more for Medicare. But regardless, you're going to pay something for Medicare. So don't let Joe Namath or Jimmy Walker on TV and all these TV ads talking about Medicare being free. Do not believe those things. Those are not true. Okay, well, now that we've got Part A and Part B, inpatient and outpatient care, we've paid for it through payroll, we're paying for it every month. Well, how does it work? Well, guys, it's health insurance. It works exactly like any other health insurance you ever have. You pay a monthly payment. They give you an ID card. You take the ID card to the doctors or the hospitals or the specialists, and they bill your insurance. So the next sentence, do you see up on the board here? It says Medicare pays 80% after I pay my Medicare medical annual deductible of $226. That's a pretty low deductible, is what we hear quite a bit. Is our clients are like, wow, my deductible at my job has been $3,000 or $4,000. Yeah, this deductible doesn't even have a comma in it. It's $226. So how that works is you can go to any doctor with Medicare in America. They just have to bill Medicare. And as long as they bill Medicare, you would pay the first $226 of your medical expenses. After you've paid that out, $226, Medicare starts paying 80% of your medical bills. That's it. Guys, literally, that's it. That's Medicare. The problem is they're leaving us with the leftover 20%, which can get kind of expensive. So we don't want to spend all of our money that we've saved up on the 20% of medical expenses. So we do something we also don't want to do, which is called buying more insurance. So now we would buy a program, a policy called a Medicare supplement. And you guys see the Medicare supplement ID card there. Well, Medicare supplement is the proper terminology. So they're really called Medicare supplement. But to confuse everybody, everything is named at least twice. So do you see in the card where it says Medigap? So people will call these things Medigap plans. Medigap and Medicare supplements are the same thing. That's like saying tomato, tomato. Okay. Now, these are done through insurance companies. So you wouldn't just have a Medicare supplement. You would have a Cigna Medicare supplement, or an Anthem Medicare supplement, or a United Healthcare Medicare supplement. So they're done by insurance companies. And these plans cost a little bit of money every month. And around the Virginia area, for a 65-year-old person, so that's a lot of things in that sentence, around Central Virginia in the year 2023, for a 65-year-old person, you would be paying around $120 a month for a Medicare supplement plan. So you got to pay $120 a month on top of the monthly payment for Medicare of $164. It's already getting kind of expensive, but that's why we have a plan and a budget and a financial advisor. All right, well, now that we've donated $120 to an insurance company, what do we get for that? Well, do you see the next sentence here? It says the supplement plan pays all the remaining 20%. Well, cool. Well, if my supplement's paying all the leftover 20% and Medicare's paying the 80%, 80% and 20% is 100%. So you're 100% covered going to the hospital, going to doctors, going to surgeries, and you don't have to worry about things, and you can go wherever you want to go, because 90 plus, 95% plus of the medical doctors and hospitals in America all bill Medicare. There's no referrals. You just go where you want to go. Everything's covered after that little deductible of $226. So if you have any older friends or family, if they ever tell you things like, well, I just had a knee replacement and I didn't have to pay anything. I went to physical therapy, didn't pay a penny. They did pay. It's just they paid $164 for Medicare, around $120 for a supplement plan. They already met their deductible of the $226, and now they're not having to pay anything the rest of the year. So that's how people can get 100% covered pretty quickly. Medicare also does not cover prescriptions, so you would need a prescription drug plan. Now, prescription drug plans are known as Part D. I would like to give credit to the government of being smart enough for putting D for drugs. I can't bring myself to do that. So I tell people Part D, the letter D stands for drugs to remember. Okay. Well, Part D is a government program, but it's administered by insurance companies. So you really don't get a Medicare drug plan. What you do get is you get a Aetna drug plan, or a Humana drug plan, or a WellCare drug plan, or a United Healthcare drug plan, or Cigna drug plan, but they're done through insurance companies. Now, they're all a tiny bit different, but they all actually do work the same from a bird's eye view. Well, they cost money. So the average price around Virginia is about $30 a month for a drug plan. There goes another $30 a month. All right, well, you buy the insurance, you pay $30 a month on average, and they give you a little plastic ID card, and you would take that ID card to your pharmacy. Now, some people go to a local pharmacy, some people go through the mail order pharmacy. Same kind of thing happens with Medicare. You can either go through the mail order pharmacies or you can go to a local retail pharmacy. But you're going to have a little bit of out-of-pocket costs when it comes to these. Some of the plans have deductibles. We're not going to get into deductibles at all because some do, some don't. But every one of these drug plans, they all have co-payments for prescriptions. That's showing up on your screen now, hopefully. But co-payments for prescriptions vary depending on the drug tier and the pharmacy I go to. Guys, there's a lot in that little sentence. So people have co-payments for prescriptions, and those co-pays are different on the different tiers. So for instance, the drug insurance companies like Humana, Blue Cross, United Healthcare, these insurance companies rank drugs in order categories called tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And the higher the tier, the higher the copayment. So we try to take low-cost generic drugs because as long as we can take low-cost generic drugs, well, those are lower tiered drugs and it's less expensive. But if you do have to take higher tiered drugs, it is what it is, but the more expensive the drug, typically the higher the copayment. It works exactly like people's group insurance because we're used to paying something for prescriptions when we pick them up at the pharmacy. You'd be surprised how many people, when they're coming off of a large group plan onto Medicare, and we tell them, well, your levothyroxine is only going to be $1. Now, your copayment's $1. Your metoprolol is only $5. Your amlodipine $1. Your metformin is completely covered for free. Your tamsulosin is $8. And they say things like, wow, that's cheaper than I had at work. So the copays are usually pretty reasonable. But to briefly recap how option number 1 works is you'd end up with these 3 ID cards. You'd have your Medicare card, a supplement ID card, and a Part D drug plan ID card. These 3 cards. And if you add all those up, it's about $310, I guess $315 a month. So it's kind of like a car payment. That's why I say it's kind of like the car. I know car payments are more than $300 now with interest rates and the cost of cars, inflation. We're not going to talk about all that. But it just helps people remember you're paying a little more every month to buy a supplement and a drug plan to have a little more coverage. You can go anywhere you want to go and not have to worry about big bills at the hospital or surgeries or things like that. You just pay copays for drugs. Okay, so that's option number 1. I tell people that's the fancy plan, that's the car. Well, not everybody can afford option number 1, but there's a whole lot of people who don't even want to pay for option number 1. So whether people can afford it or cannot afford it, there is another option, and this other option is called option number 2, rightfully so. Now, this option is pretty much the opposite of what we just talked about. So option number 2 is designed to save money. And most of the time, it's not all the time, but most of the time, option number 2 does save people money. And that's what it's supposed to do. That's what it's designed to do. But it's not designed for freedom and flexibility. It's not designed for a whole lot of choices. So it's kind of like the bus. If you think about a bus, the bus is less expensive. It's cheaper to ride the bus, but the bus is a not really designed for freedom of flexibility. You can't go anywhere you want to go. You got to go where the bus goes, right? Well, with this option, with option number 2, you don't actually show your Medicare ID card. So you don't show your Medicare card. You don't have a supplement, and your drug plan is all combined under one ID card. So this program is called Medicare Advantage. So option number 2 is actually called Medicare Advantage. Now they do have to name it twice. So Medicare Advantage is also called Part C, letter C like Charlie. Now we tell people that letter C stands for combines. It doesn't really, but it does actually combine things together if you think about it, because it combines your Medicare card, because you don't show your Medicare card, you don't have a supplement, and the drug coverage is usually included inside of your Advantage plan. So that's the old Joe Namath, the one card does it all TV commercials. They're mainly promoting Medicare Advantage plans, and they are wonderful plans for what they're designed to do, which is save money. They work a little different though. So just like the bus, you can't go anywhere you want to go on an Advantage plan. You just have to go to the doctors that are covered by the network of doctors of your Advantage plan. Now, these Advantage plans are done by companies. So Medicare Advantage is a government program, but it's administered through insurance companies again. So you would get a Humana Advantage plan, or you would get a Blue Cross Blue Shield Advantage plan, or you'd get a Aetna Advantage plan. If you're in Northern Virginia or California, you can get a Kaiser Advantage plan. If you're in South Florida, you can get a Devoted Advantage plan, but they're through insurance companies. But around the Richmond area, it's mostly Humana, United Healthcare, and Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Well, if you went on a Humana Advantage plan, you just have to go to the doctors that are covered by Humana. It's not a bad thing, it's just how they work. More and more group plans do have network of doctors. So people are getting kind of used to having to go to the doctors that are covered by their plan. Well, that's how Advantage plans work. But that's why I say it's like the bus, is because you can't go anywhere you want to go. You got to go where the bus loop is, kind of thing, the bus route. And every time you use the bus, you'd have to pay bus fares, right? The little bus fares. Well, on Advantage plan, they're not called fares, they're called copays. And on Advantage plans, you have these little co-payments for every service. So every time you use the bus, you got to pay a fee to ride the bus. These are co-payments, and they're very reasonable. I'll give you an example. A lot of places, a lot of Advantage plans, their co-payment at the emergency room is $100, which isn't bad. You'd pay $100 to go to the emergency room, that's your co-payment. Your insurance company would pay the rest. If you had to go have a surgery, like cataract surgery or a carpal tunnel surgery or knee surgery, there's a copay. Around here, it's usually around $300 for a copay. If you had an x-ray, you got to pay $50 for an x-ray. If you have an MRI, you got to pay $200 for an MRI. I'm not going to give you all these things. It's just, I want you to remember there are small little co-payments for every service. There's also co-payments for prescriptions, and the co-payments for prescriptions vary depending on the drug tier. That should sound awfully familiar because it works the same way as before. It works the same way like group coverage. People will still have co-payments for prescriptions, and those co-payments are different on the different levels called tiers. Higher the tier, higher the co-payment. Okay, so we got to go to the doctors that are covered, and when we do go, we're going to pay a little bit of money out of pocket. But we still have to pay for Medicare. We still have to pay for Medicare, and Medicare is $164.90. So that should also sound familiar. Because whether you go on a supplement, the car, or whether you go on the bus, Medicare Advantage, either way you go, you got to pay Medicare, and Medicare is going to cost you $164.90 this year in 2023. But guys, remember earlier when we were paying like $120 for a supplement plan and then around $30 for a drug plan. With the supplemental side of things, with option number one, you're paying more above and beyond what Medicare costs. Well, these Advantage plans, the large majority of Advantage plans, especially around Virginia, well, they actually don't cost anything per month. So most of the Advantage plans around Virginia don't cost anything per month. Well, that's kind of weird. I mean, come on. How do you buy insurance but not pay the insurance company anything? Like, how do you get a Humana Advantage plan but not pay Humana anything? How do you buy a United Healthcare Advantage plan and not pay United Healthcare anything? That should be kind of weird. Well, they're not really free. That's also the reason you don't see your Medicare ID card over here. The reason why you don't see your Medicare card under Advantage plans, Medicare is not going to pay your medical bills if you go on an Advantage plan. Medicare is not going to give 80% of the money to the doctors of the hospital. Instead of Medicare giving money to doctors and hospitals, Medicare gives money to the Advantage plan company that you chose, and Medicare is walking away. That's why you have to go to that particular company's network of doctors. Because if you went on a Humana Advantage plan, Humana is going to get roughly, on average, national, it's about $1,100. If you went on a United Healthcare Advantage plan, United Healthcare is going to get around $1,100 a month from the government. But because these plans are so heavily subsidized, most of these Advantage plans don't cost anything per month. So kind of like the bus. You don't have to pay anything for the bus each month, right? So you don't pay for the bus unless you start using the bus. And if you started using the bus, you pay bus fares. And you got to go where the bus goes, which is like a network of doctors. So if you really think about it, pretty much works like the bus. But it is cheaper typically to go on Medicare Advantage. So that's how Medicare Advantage works. So then we have another big thing, which is these two options and choosing these two options. Well, nobody should tell you personally which one you personally should do. And your friends are going to have one and you can have the other. Your spouse might have one different than you have. But this is a personal decision. And we help people figure out which company is the right company, but we don't push people one way or the other. If you want a supplement, we'll help you find every supplement. We do them all. If you want an Advantage plan, call us. We'll help you pick your Advantage plan. We do them all. It doesn't matter to us. The main thing you're going to have to decide is which way you want to go and which option is right for you. But here's a kicker, because not everybody realizes how switching between plans work. And this is a big deal. So I have you guys really pay attention to this one. Hopefully you've been paying attention, but this is a big deal. So in most states, now there's a couple little states that this is different, but this is absolutely all up and down the East Coast over here. This is how this works. So when people are new to Medicare, okay, people are brand new to Medicare. They're turning 65, coming into Medicare. Or they're over the age of 65 and now they're retiring. And when they're retiring, they're coming off of a group health plan and then they need to get on the Medicare. Well, if people choose option number one, they have to sell those plans to you when you're new to Medicare. Both options are on the table when you're brand new to Medicare. So you can choose a supplement or an Advantage plan. You can choose the car or the bus when you're new. I'm not telling you which way to go, but if you go with option number one first, if you go with a supplement in the beginning, it's yours. They have to cover you and you can keep it for the rest of your life. The price goes up a little bit every year, I know that's a big shocker for everybody. The prices go up every year, but supplements go up a little bit every year in price. But you can still keep your car. You can keep your supplement forever if you want to. Now, if it ever got too expensive, or you just didn't want that much coverage anymore, if you ever got to the point where you wanted to leave the supplement and go over to Medicare Advantage, you can absolutely do that. That's no problem. So let me say that again. You can move from a supplement and jump onto Medicare Advantage later in life if you would like to. Medicare Advantage plans are required to take everybody. So you can go from the car to the bus. Or you can start on Medicare Advantage. So you can start on option 2. You can start on the bus. But here's the rule. And now there's some exceptions to the rule. I know there's exceptions. But the rule is once people get on the bus, once they get on the Medicare Advantage, they're not going to be coming off Medicare Advantage. So once you're on the bus, you're on the bus. It is very difficult. It's not likely that people go from an Advantage plan back over to a supplement. So people have to make that understanding and that decision that when they go on Medicare Advantage, they're pretty much going to be locked into Medicare Advantage the rest of their life. Well, you can change seats on the bus. That's okay. That's no problem. So if you got on a Medicare Advantage and you got on a Humana Advantage plan, and for some reason you didn't like Humana, well, you can move to the United Healthcare Advantage plan. Or if you didn't like United Healthcare, you can move to Cigna, or you can move to Aetna. So you can change seats on the bus. But if you move from Humana to Blue Cross, well, now you just got to go to Blue Cross doctors and pay the Blue Cross copayments. So it's okay to change seats on the bus. And that's right there is what a lot of people don't understand, is because a good amount of people think that because they're super healthy at the beginning, if they go on option 2, then later they'll just go get a supplement. That is not how it works. For most people, that's not how it works. And unfortunately, we get a lot of those phone calls during the annual enrollment period, which is happening in about 2 weeks from today. So the annual enrollment period that happens from October 15th until December 7th, that's for people who want to get on the bus or change seats on the bus, basically. So we get a lot of phone calls, though, during the enrollment period of people who are on the bus who would like to get off the bus, but they just can't because that's not really how it works. So we help them either change seats or just tell them they're on a good plan, they're on a good seat on the bus, and kind of a little bit more how their plan works. Okay, so I'm going to kind of start opening it up for questions, but I want to say one thing real quick because, you know, the equity concept guys are amazing. And I'm going to poke here so I can find the question and answers and all that kind of stuff. But what I want to give a shout out for is the advisors at Equity Concepts are really important to have because they look at the whole picture for people. And I was talking with David earlier that there's a lot of times, especially in the group insurance market now, that these group plans are pretty expensive, right? And we are starting to see a transition of people who are still working for a company, even a big company, but they have decided to come off of the group health plan at their job and come over to Medicare because they can actually get better health insurance under Medicare for cheaper than what their group plan is. And I'll give you a perfect example because this happened to one of their clients a few weeks ago. Is there was a husband and a wife, right? Or spouses. I should probably get better with politically correct, but they're spouses, right? And he was covered by his wife's group plan. Now, if you guys have a group plan, everybody knows your job, they go through this open enrollment period every year. Well, take a look at that because if it had been just her by herself as the employee only, she would only paid $100 a month out of her paychecks for health insurance. Just for her, it's $100 because she's the employee. But when she put her husband on, he was just on for a long time. But with her husband on the plan, it turned into a family plan or a employee plus spouse. And it raised the rate up to $600 a month. Okay, well, if it was just her by herself at $100 at her group, but when it's the two of them, it was $600 out of her paycheck. Well, that goes to show that his portion of the group plan was costing them $500 a month out of her paycheck. Well, again, thank goodness for good advisors, because they looked at that and they said, hey, look, why don't you come off of the group plan? And he could come off of the group plan. He could get whatever he wanted. I mean, he ended up choosing a supplement. That was his choice. But he was paying around $300 for a supplement. So now he's paying $300 a month instead of his wife paying $500 a month. I can tell you what, if you ask your financial advisor what they think you should do with an extra $200 a month, they're not going to tell you to go blow it. They're going to tell you to save it. And because she wasn't even maxing out her 401k, they told her to put it back in the 401k. So then that extra $200, they were just paying themselves the $200 and getting a little bit more of a company match. So they came out with, he had better health insurance for less money. They were then putting away more money, an extra couple $100 a month in a retirement account. And talk about a win-win situation. Now, I want to say and point something out, it might not be obvious to everybody, but you know how much equity concepts made out of that whole idea? Zero. They don't make any money if you put extra money towards one thing or another. They don't make extra money if they told you about us and we can help you with things about Medicare insurance. They're actually doing this for their customers. I mean, David's spending time away from his wife this evening to put this all together, and they don't benefit at all. They're investing in their customers. And I'd say this even if David wasn't on the webinar here. Not every advisor do this. Not every advisory group does this. Usually, they just say things like, call me when you got a bunch of money to invest and we'll help you. But if you're not calling me about investing, I don't want to deal with you. They really care about their clients and their people a lot more than just how much money do you have or not have. So I'll definitely tell you to thank your advisor, because they're the ones who put this together. They're the ones who sent out the emails. They're the ones who sent out the invitations. They're the ones who called people to remind them about this. And it's pretty cool to have a group of people who care more about their clients than just the money they have invested. And I'll tell you, that's why I stole Bill Medlin fair and square. David, I stole him fair and square. He had retired.
We'll let it slide because he's adding value in other places in his life. And I know I don't want to cut you off, but I will say we have some questions. And I don't want people to think we're not going to get to them. If we have to go over, remember, if you're flipping the steaks, don't overcook them. We know you got to drop off. Remember, this is going to be available on our website, or if you can't find it, let us know and we'll email it to you. And I just want to make sure people understand. They're probably looking at the clock going, I know there's questions. Are they going to get you those? We're going to get to them right now.
Okay, Bill, that's for you. Take it away, Bill.
Wendy wants to know, does the darned if you do statement apply to Part A of Medicare?
So does the darned if you do statement apply to Part A of Medicare? And the answer is kind of yes. It's Part A and Part B. But here's what happens. Earlier when I said you're darned if you do sign up for Medicare and you should not have signed up for Medicare. All right. Well, one of the many reasons why people should not sign up for Medicare at age 65 is if they're covered by a large group health plan. And the government says any employer with 20 active full-time employees or more, that considers a large group. So Wendy, there's a lot of people who are 65 and older who are still working, but when they're turning 65, they get bombarded with mailers and phone calls and friends and family and internet and Facebook and all this junk that just comes swinging towards them. And they don't really know what to do. So they just sign up for things they should never sign up for. Well, there's a lot of employers, and the employee wants to stay on the group plan because maybe it's a really good plan, or maybe it's a really good price. Okay, well, if you want to stay on your group plan, that's fantastic. You don't have to sign up for Part A at age 65. But the main reason, again, many reasons why not to, but one of the reasons not to sign up for Part A, if you are covered by a large group plan, has to deal with health savings accounts. So health savings accounts, known as HSAs, are only available to people who are only covered by a high deductible health plan. But Medicare is not considered a high deductible health plan. So if somebody signs up for Part A, then they're no longer allowed to contribute money to a health savings account. Well, that's the whole reason to have a high deductible health plan to begin with, is to be able to save that money in a very tax advantaged account called a health savings account. So when people get talked into Part A, some of those people don't realize that. And some of those people keep contributing money to a health savings account when they should not, because they did pick up Part A when they should not have picked up Part A. And then later on, the fun family members at the good old IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, they call you, actually they send you letters, but they would send that person a letter that said, hey, you were not allowed to put that money in the HSA because you had enrolled in the Medicare Part A. So you should not have put that money in an HSA, but you did. And because you did what you shouldn't have done, you're going to pay a penalty, and we want that back taxes. So then, depending on how fast they caught that person, sometimes it's caught in 2 years, sometimes it's caught in 7 or 8 years. So imagine the people who put the money in the first year when they shouldn't, they put the money in the second year they shouldn't, they put it in the third year that they shouldn't, then they retired, then they turn 75, and finally the IRS catches up to them and says, hey, remember 7 years ago, you were putting money in an HSA that you shouldn't have? Well, you should have paid tax on that money. And because you should have paid tax 7 years ago, we want our money and we want a 7-year penalty. But you did it 6 years ago and 5 years ago. So we want another 6 years of penalties and another 5 years of penalties. And it's a pretty bad snowball. So that's one of the reasons why people should not sign up for Medicare at age 65 if they're covered by a large group health plan, especially if they have a health savings account. Right, Bill? Hopefully that answered that question.
And that was very deep. And I know we now only have 6 questions, but we only have 2 minutes. Again, folks, don't burn the steaks. Like mine, medium rare. So pull them. If you need to drop off, this is your pass. You're not going to miss anything. It's going to be recorded. I promise you that. And you can go right to moment 28 would be moment 58 minutes, and then you can get the rest of the questions and answered. So I appreciate everyone staying, but I understand if you drop off, and thank you for joining us this evening, but I'm going to continue on so we can get some questions answered.
Okay, Anonymous, can you explain who should and who should not sign up for Medicare at age 65 during tonight's session? I think you did that.
Yeah, for the most part. So I would just say the people who should sign up for Medicare at age 65, there's a lot of people who should. And I'll give you one example of people who should sign up for Medicare Part A and Part B at 65 is somebody who's already considered a retiree. because there's a lot of people out there who are still retiring prior to the age of 65. And some of those people retired from a career, and that career offered them retiree health insurance. So they're still getting retiree health insurance from a big employer. But as soon as they're turning 65, they have to sign up for Medicare Part A and Part B. It's vital. They are not considered actively working employees. And they're not covered by their spouse who is actively working. If you know the word active, I've mentioned it a few times, actively working is the key takeaway there. If they're a retiree or covered under a retiree's health insurance, then they have to sign up for Medicare Part A and Part B at 65. There's quite a number of other ones. So again, I don't want to go over 50 different scenarios, but those are two main reasons why you should and why you should not.
Okay, Shauna wants to know if you didn't sign up at age 65, but have had continuous coverage through spouse employer, it's her understanding that there is no penalty, correct?
She is correct. So, Shauna, for you, if you did not sign up for Medicare, and I mean any part of Medicare, Part A or Part B, and you've been continuously covered by your spouse's large group health plan, when the time comes that you do want to come over to Medicare, and by the way, you're allowed to come off of a group health plan anytime throughout the year, by the way. But when you do come off of the group health plan or when your spouse retires, then you're gonna need to have proof that you were covered with a employer health plan since you turned 65. And there's a governmental form to do that. So your spouse's human resource people need to sign off on a form, give you back that form, and then that form needs to go to the Social Security Administration. And that tells Medicare and Social Security that you did have continuous coverage under an employer and you should not have to pay any penalty. So you're correct. There will be no penalty for you when you do finally come over to Medicare.
Okay, next question is from Anonymous. From the state of Tennessee, can you recommend Tennessee Medicare insurance brokers who give unbiased advice? There is a well-reviewed Boomer Benefits in Tennessee, and they want to know if it's any relation to us.
So I can give you a recommendation in Tennessee because I'm part of a lot of agency councils. So if you can get that area to David Saunders, then he can get it to me and I can find a local, because I typically like to try to have people who are more local, but I do know quite a number of people who are in Tennessee who are unbiased and they'd be happy to answer Medicare questions for you. That is one state we are not licensed in. So it would be a good idea for you to find a local or at least a very familiar with Tennessee Medicare insurance agent or broker. For the other part of that question, there's a company out there called Boomer Benefits, and they're not actually in Tennessee. They're located in Texas, and we are not of any relation to each other. They're a wonderful organization. They're headquartered out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The lady and her brother who own that company are wonderful people. They're extremely hardworking, and she's very knowledgeable. They don't personally do a lot of client appointments anymore. It's more of a large call center. It's a huge company. I mean, they got over 200 employees, right? A little over 100 now. They were hiring another 100 last time I talked to her. But it's a huge company, and they do have agents. So that could be a resource, but you also might want to have a little more personal, agent that would help you with that kind of thing. But no, we're not in relation.
Another anonymous question. Per the National Council on Aging Medicare Standards of Excellence, 4 organizations have completed their review and training process. For example, Fidelity is one of the 4. Is this a reasonable parameter to use in choosing
So the National Council on Aging, and it says Medicare Standards of Excellence, then they have organizations out there called SHIP. I got to be very careful when I say that word. SHIP, SHIP, which stands for State Health Insurance Programs. And a lot of the Department of Aging's, like for instance, the people around the Richmond area, there's a group called Senior Connections. Well, every state and every location in the state has these quote unquote advisors that are paid for by the state. But unfortunately, I don't find them to be an overly wonderful, detailed resource. And I hate to say that, but they're volunteers and they're not licensed. So you have an unlicensed volunteer who sometimes helps people with Medicare. And then when their advice goes the wrong direction and the consumer has a problem, well, the consumer has no recourse to go back on, they're unlicensed. The consumer just has a problem. And then that consumer has to go sort it out themselves because the person who gave them that advice doesn't actually deal with the day-to-day client problems and issues like a typical Medicare insurance broker would. So for instance, we can give you recommendations based on thousands and thousands and thousands of people that we've talked to over the years. I mean, I've talked to over 40,000 Medicare people one-on-one. So picked up a few things, over 40,000 conversations. So it's a good start. It's not a bad avenue to get some high level, what is part A, what is part B kind of things. But anything else, I would probably try to find a local licensed expert who main line of business is Medicare insurance. They don't do Medicare on the side. They don't do it as a part-time job. They don't do it as a volunteer. Medicare is their primary business. And that's who I would say that you would be good to find.
Bryan and Bill, you guys are doing a heck of a good job because we are over 6 minutes and we really haven't had anyone drop off. So you are just superstars here, keeping people active while they're waiting, or the steaks aren't getting overcooked or something, or maybe they're putting the steaks on after. We only have 3 questions. Hold on, folks. I know this is riveting and exciting, but we're almost to the end, and thank you for staying with us.
Okay, the next one is anonymous also. Is the $120 for the supplement independent of one's general physical health?
Yes, and I will try to make this one shorter. There's not a lot of short answers with Medicare. This one's finally short, anonymous. So the Medicare supplement plan that I related to at $120 a month in the Virginia area in the year 2023 has nothing to do with health. So when people are brand new to Medicare, the supplement companies have to sell them the plans at the normal going rate. So whether somebody is healthy as a horse or sick as a dog, they're still going to get the normal incoming price that every healthy person will have. I mean, I've done 8 plans today, and out of all those plans, the cheapest one was $97 and the most was $141, but that person is 68 years old also. But the average is around $120, has nothing to do with health.
Okay, Diane Petrie, she said she lost audio, so you might want to get up with her, David.
Already done it, already on it. We're good. Come on, man.
Okay, from Nancy, can you change insurance companies if you enroll in a Medicare supplement plan? Is there an open enrollment period?
That's a great question, Nancy. So the question again is, can you change insurance companies if you enroll in a supplement? Well, if you're in a Medicare supplement, and we're not going to talk Advantage plans, so we're not talking about switching from supplements to Advantage plans, we're strictly only talking about supplements. So when you're brand new, every company has to take you if you want them. but only when you're new. So once you've been on a Medicare supplement plan and it's kind of gone that 6-month kind of time frame, you're 65 and a half, or you've been on a Medicare supplement for about 6 months, from that point moving forward, in most states, I know some people was in Tennessee and there's people from all over going to be watching this, but in most states, here's the funny thing about supplement plans. You can change a Medicare supplement plan anytime throughout the year, any month of the year. But you have to go through medical underwriting. So from going from one supplement company like Cigna over to a different supplement company like United Healthcare gets to ask you medical questions. And if they don't like your answers, they don't have to take you at all. So it's very important to pick the right supplement plan to begin with, because most people keep the same supplement the rest of their lives. Another example I always use for this, I don't have probably a lot of time, David's going to kill me, is the old game I used to play in church called musical chairs. And if anybody's ever played musical chairs, as long as the music's playing, you can change seats, you can change chairs. Well, that's like Medicare supplement plans. As long as the music's playing, you can change supplements. As long as you're healthy enough and the music's playing, you can change chairs. So you can move from Anthem to Aetna and Aetna to Mutual of Omaha. As long as you're healthy enough to change chairs, as long as you're healthy enough to move plans. But when the music stops playing, meaning your health declines to a point where you no longer can qualify medically, well, the music stopped. And if you know the game musical chairs, you better be on a chair if you wanted a chair when the music stops. Because when you're no longer healthy enough to qualify for a supplement, you're going to be on that particular Medicare supplement plan for the rest of your life, unless you want to move to Medicare Advantage later. So one of those other analogies. Again, that's not the truth in every state, but in most states, you do have to medically qualify to change supplements. Great question.
Anonymous question. Annual enrollment is in 2 weeks, and decisions have to be made regarding prescription drug plans. What are the elements that should be considered?
Okay. So the annual enrollment period for Medicare is October 15th until December the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. Whoever in the government thought ending it on Pearl Harbor Day had some weird sense of humor. But what happens is during that period, the annual enrollment period, if you were on option number 1, remember that ID card that was down at the bottom that just said Part D drug plan? Remember how you had a supplement, you had Medicare and a supplement and a drug plan? Well, that drug plan ID card, you can change your drug plan every year during the enrollment period. So, for instance, there are 24 available drug plans in Virginia right now. Well, when you're looking at prescription drug plans, you don't have to change if you don't want to change. So you don't have to re-enroll, you do not have to re-sign up. But if you would like to change or like it look at change, then you need to call your agent, you need to call your broker and have them look at the available drug plans. You can also go to a website called Medicare.gov. Again, this only works for Medicare drug plans only. Please don't try to buy an Advantage plan on Medicare.gov. That's a train wreck. But when you're looking at Medicare drug plans, the Part D drug plans, what you really want to focus on is the total cost of ownership. Do not get caught up on how low or how high the monthly payment is. And don't get caught up on how low the cost of drugs are or how high the cost of drugs are. You got to look at both. You got to look at the total cost of what you're going to pay and base it on the medications you currently take. So I'll give you an example. You want to find the plan that has the total lowest out-of-pocket cost for the drugs you currently take at the pharmacy you want to go to. The way you find the total cost is you find out how much your insurance cost per month, like the example earlier was $30 a month, $30 a month times 12 months, $360. So you take that $360 total cost for insurance, and then you add up how much you're totally going to pay for drugs all year long. And when you know the total cost of drugs and the total cost of your insurance, and you stick them together, that is the total cost of what you're going to be paying for prescriptions. And that's what you should be focused on, is trying to be paying the lowest possible cost for the medications you take at the pharmacy you go to.
Okay, last question. Is there a time limit to sign up for Medicare once you have retired after the age of 65?
Well, that's a pretty detailed one. So is there a time limit to sign up for Medicare once you have retired after the age of 65? I would tell you, Anonymous, if you are trying to sign up for Medicare over the age of 65 after you've retired, you've kind of screwed up. You want to actually start the enrollment application for Medicare before you retire. We like to talk to our clients 90 days before they retire. So the bad joke around our office is you don't got to tell your boss you're quitting in 90 days. You just got to tell Bryan you're quitting in 90 days, or tell Boomer, because we want to help people go through those forms. Like the question earlier, you got to get this form signed by your employer to prove that you were covered. And then you turn that into Social Security, and then they'll start your Part B. You can do Part A online, no problem. But the issue is, if people are doing it after their employment, they pretty much don't have any coverage. Even if they think they have coverage through COBRA, COBRA doesn't work without Medicare. COBRA coverage only pays after Medicare pays. Just had that nightmare happen to one person I talked to last week. So you got to get Part A and Part B before you retire. Now, technically, the people at Social Security who drive me crazy, they will tell people you have 8 months to sign up for Part B after you lose your group coverage. That is half of the information you need to know. Technically, that's accurate, but it sure leaves a lot to be desired. So technically, you have 8 months following when you left active employment to sign up for Medicare. Okay, fine, you got 8 months to do it, but the whole 8 months you're doing it, you have basically no insurance. So that's a huge liability that people at Social Security don't always tell people. So back to what I said at the very beginning, if you're about to retire and you're over the age of 65, please start the process 90 days ahead of time so that you don't get caught uninsured after you retire. Nobody likes gap in insurance coverages. And I think that's it, Bill. Is that right? Oh, wait, no, we got one.
Got one more question. Nancy wants to know, following on the changing med sub question, can the rates go up based on medical underwriting?
Okay, so Nancy, the question, Bill, I think it's changing supplements. Can the rates go up based on medical underwriting? Yes, they can. So if you want to try to change from one supplement to another supplement, and the company that you've applied to, they can tell you, no, thank you, we don't want you, and they just deny your application altogether. Or they could say, Nancy, we're willing to take you, but we're going to charge you a whole lot more because of the answers you answered on that application. Because if you're going through underwriting and the insurance company thinks you're a much greater risk, then they can charge you more money than what they initially quoted you. But most of the time, they'll just say, no, thank you, and just not even cover you. But once again, that's why it's so important to get with the right company at the beginning, so you don't have to worry about, switching supplements.
I think that does it, folks. We did have a few people drop off. If the steaks got past medium rare, not on my watch. I'm glad that they dropped off, but I know people got a lot of tremendous value tonight, gentlemen, and thank you for getting our clients informed and being on the right side of two systems, the informed system. Again, thank you. I will say, if anyone wants to follow up with Boomer Insurance for additional questions, you can let me know. You can Google them. I know they're held by unique requirements where sometimes in certain situations they cannot call you. I know that sounds a bit odd in the world of insurance, but because it is a Medicare policy, it is guided by the government guidelines, and that is one of them where there's no solicitation. So that isn't and they stick to that. It's not, oh yeah, they'll call you anyways. They don't. They want to stay licensed, they want to stay independent, and they don't want to get in trouble. So we certainly can connect everyone if that needs to occur. Everyone has our contact information, and I'm happy to make those connections when need be. We have gone over, but I think it was well worth it. It's 6:50. Questions. Oh, let's make sure we didn't. I see number 12. No, we did it. We have done. We've done it all. We've added value, and so I'll let everyone sign off. Thank you again, Bill and Bryan, for adding value and educating on Medicare and these uncharted waters. We want to make sure we're handing people not just an oar, but we want to get them into the Coast Guard lifeboat to get them back to dry land and safety. So, and that's what we're doing. So I'll just keep talking if you let me. So I'm gonna stop. So good night, everyone, and thank you, and happy fall.